Welcome to the show, everyone. As I always say, because I love my show, I'm very excited about today, and I know you're going to be too. Of course, I have back one of our most favorite guests, Dr. Nisha Winters, who needs no introduction, but if you do, she's written The Metabolic Approach to Cancer. She's been on the show like 6 times, and Healing into Dying was her first show. We did The Metabolic Approach to Cancer was the second show. We've talked about mistletoe and cancer therapy. We recorded in Greece. She's been on the Something to Wine About podcast. So there's been a few times. If you don't know her, please read the bio underneath this video if you're on YouTube, or in the show notes on the podcast. If you are finding this on YouTube and you're looking for Nisha and you don't know me, hi, I'm JJ, and this is my show. So what that means is I'm going to talk. And in fact, I'm going to talk a lot because I got a lot to share today. That's why we're doing the show. And if you don't like me, I am totally cool with that. If you want more of just Dr. Nisha, you can go to drnisha.com or mtih.org.
Yep.
Woohoo, I got it. Okay. And any other place that they can
Those are good. Those are good places. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So again, check the show notes or all of what's below here on the video on YouTube. And again, no offense. If you don't like me, go find her. She's definitely one to follow, but we're similar in energy. So if you like her, you might like me. Stick around for a little while. Okay, so today's topic, we're going to talk about psilocybin. We're going to talk about psychedelics. And those of you that are in my closer communities, in my memberships or in my mastermind or in any of my rewiring your core wound pattern program or the 6-month deep dive or any of the programs I've done in the last couple of years, you've sort of been on the journey with me. You've heard my experiences. Maybe I've shared them with you. But Nisha is the reason why I started to learn some of this, and because I'm writing a book and thought, well, I should probably know about how this affects emotions if I actually want to finish the book. So before we get started with my story, because again, I'm going to tell a story. Nisha, if you had to set the tone for the listener right now as to what they can expect or what how they should listen to this, or how they, want them to be open about this journey, or who this is for. Maybe that's a good one to ask. Who would this be for, do you think?
Okay. Well, I think this is a really good conversation to have for folks who are really naive to this, or have a certain impression or a belief system, or understanding, or maybe a belief that this is something that could be, that is harmful, or, very dangerous, or very illegal, and not really understanding the history of it, the origins to it, the rationale behind it, the ceremonial history behind it, and even the more modern time research behind it, and what is on the horizon for the future research in this field. So I think it's really important for folks who are really green to this. And in fact, in my world, which we're going to talk about a little bit more, most of the types of folks I've worked with in my career, this was really out of left field for them, really conversations that we weren't just having willy-nilly. So very thoughtful, and we'll talk about that process here in a moment as well. And then even for those who might have dabbled in this type of medicine, maybe they'll, I hear stories all the time, like, oh my gosh, I totally did these things when I was in college and I did not have a good experience, and yada, yada, yada. I'm like, well, how were they used? These do require a certain level of reverence and intentionality and expertise and guidance as they were meant to be. And so I want to plant that seed for some of you who might have had an experience that was less than stellar. And then also for those of you who find that this is a very integral part of your own healing process, maybe you'll learn a few new things today that you weren't aware. Maybe it'll help validate and help you understand why these might have had the utility they did in your life at different times. So I think we're going to kind of just have a conversation about something that not too long ago, we couldn't be having this conversation.
Right. And I was definitely not even interested in this conversation and at all. And it's because so for those of you that know me, I'm a truth seeker, and there's been a part of me that has always trusted my intuition, well, very deeply, more now than ever. But when I was younger, knowing sort of my own center, if you will, like when I was going off to college, I had a lot of people say, oh, you're going to go to college, you're going to have sex, you're going to smoke pot. Did neither of those. I said, no, I'm not. Oh, yes, you will. Peer pressure. You're going to do all these crazy things. I was like, no, I'm not. because I was very clear about where I was going and what I was doing. And it's not like I was against them. I just didn't feel the need. If I felt like I wanted to have sex, I would have had sex. I did eventually have sex, of course. But it wasn't the way people thought it was going to be. And the same thing with like recreational drugs. I definitely drink. And of course, those of you that don't know by now, I'm launching my wine brand if I haven't already. But, and that's another conversation we'll have another time. But besides, and even with wine or with alcohol, I was always, especially starting my business, very attuned to, why am I drinking this right now? Like if I knew I was stressed out and I opened a bottle of wine, I couldn't drink it because I would know why I was doing it. I was doing it to numb. And there's a part of me that when that awareness comes up in you, it stops you from doing the behavior. So I've kind of had that sort of attuned awareness. So I've never really been interested in recreational drugs because I didn't understand any value. Because of course, in high school or college or even beyond, you see people use them in ways where they get silly or they do crazy things, and then they usually regret it. And there's usually some kind of hangover. And I'm like, well, I don't understand why you're doing this. So I just never considered it. So we go to Mexico, and for my birthday, it must have been 2021, I think it was, and met with Nisha and Steve for the first time and had a wonderful weekend and celebrated my birthday. And what came up in conversation on my birthday dinner was Doug and sort of Doug's anxiety. And, Doug's had anxiety. We all have some level of repression of emotional energy that creates some nervousness that we may have from time to time. Some of you live with it every day because you don't have an outlet. Doug's was pretty high at one point for the majority of his life, so much so that in 2015, he had his very first panic attack. And he didn't know what it was. He thought he didn't know if he was having a heart attack. It took him to the hospital. He saw many doctors. He had no idea what was happening to him, but it was a culmination of many years of stress, of unidentified emotional, anxious stress that then sort of broke his body down into a panic, into a sweat, into this experience that he talks about and did talk about on the show. And he shared it on the show also. So I think, and because of Steve and Doug's relationship and their sort of the way they resonate with each other, Doug always cries every time he's with Nisha and Steve. So,
so precious. I love it.
He feels like of all the friends he's had in the years, that people like Steve and you and our friend Michael, like there aren't a lot of men who actually really know him that way. I have these conversations, you have these conversations, but the majority of people in life don't have deep, meaningful, transformative, self-reflective, conscious, let's look at the shit underneath the rug conversations. It just doesn't happen. And all of a sudden now Doug's thrown into this world of JJ and it's like, holy shit. Right. So you guys started talking about and I'm going to have you tell this story. So my story isn't an hour long without breathing, but, so you started to talk about, about how you had used it with cancer patients. Yeah. So do you want to tell, you talked about some of the either things you had participated in or, others had, or tell them, the people who are listening, what you shared with us when you started to sort of just very gently plant the seeds.
Right. Well, I think if I recall this conversation, we were talking about how Doug had kind of tried a lot of things, all the things. And he was just sort of in a holding pattern. He'd made a lot of progress, but he was feeling still a little bit stuck. I think those were kind of some of the words or the patterns that were described that night. And so somehow that led into the conversation of me sharing in my personal and professional experience that when you've done all the things from counseling, to body work, energy work, to homeopathic remedies, to pharmaceutical interventions, to, major therapeutic, therapies, et cetera. And you're still playing the same reels over and over, and you can't break or shake the pattern, either mentally, emotionally, physiologically, spiritually, biochemically. I have found that once you kind of hit that roadblock, that the proper, thoughtful, intentional application of some of these substances that we have co-evolved with can be of great benefit to create some new neuroplasticity, meaning some new pathways in the brain that allows you to have a different perspective and to be given other opportunities that you can then see a little more clearly and maybe make different choices in how things unfold. So that, simply put, was sort of how the conversation started to happen. And like many people, as we talked about, who is this conversation for? there are definitely a large camp of people who are like, oh, heck no, I'm not doing that. Right. Like the wall goes up. And that night, I think there was definite resistance, not in a, I'm not interested in learning about it, but just like, I don't think that's for me kind of conversation. And as you guys got to know us a little bit better and got to realize that we are not out there, like, I don't know, getting high and trying to check out, what is that, tune in, check out, or whatever that whole old, the mantra of the 60s was all about there. We are very thoughtful, intentional people, and we're also very data driven. My husband and I am very scientifically driven. And so we just started having some really interesting conversations. But to backtrack, I think one of the stories that might have landed to help both of you get a little more curious was to share a little bit of Steve and I's experience. And I don't know if that's the time to go into this.
Yeah. There was also, I think what you were also sharing at that time, though, was about some of the patients. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you had, that was the first time I think I had heard you say, and I heard it. And again, there was so much going on. We had just met, we had done a couple of podcasts already. It wasn't until last year, I think it was, that I really heard it, because we were in a different place and I was in a different place with even the work that I'm doing in the world. The work has continued to evolve and expand and change. And so it became, and now I've worked with a number of cancer patients and been able to see patterns even more clearly, and to be able to identify blocks and sort of things that work and things that don't work. And where do we pull in different tools that are a little more extreme or not extreme, or how do we shortcut this or make this faster for certain personality types that won't necessarily do this willingly, consciously, with their own choices in life. And then again, there's the other aspect of the things that you can't create with just the way that you think or choose or meditate or whatever. There's another level of what happens physiologically that creates a different perspective. And I'm going to say you're on a different plane of existence, even like a different frequency. So, and it is all brain, because I had started doing whole brain living with Dr. Jo Bolte-Taylor. I used her work in Awaken Your Dream Life, and did stretch people, again, with the things that we could do. There was no substances or anything like that, but understanding these, how to create neuroplasticity differently, and the different tools. There are more than one way to do this, but this is definitely one of those ways that I had not considered. So between you talking about, and I'm going to shortcut, and then I want you to tell your story. The shortcut and the bottom line of what you had said then was that I remember. I mean, there was a lot of things that were said. There was wine, was that the cancer patients were losing their fear of death, which means a lot of them would outlive their diagnosis, because it was the stress, it was the emotions. Because when we get together, we talk about, I like to talk about with you, like looking at people and sort of diagnosing the psychological, behavioral belief system things, because that's what I do. And I don't have a lot of people to talk about that with on this level. So I just love having that, because while you're handling also the physical, I'm handling the emotional and the mental and the spiritual. But I'm wanting it from the scientific perspective, but then also the application in a real way that isn't just meditation, journaling. It's the thing. It's like, how do we actually make real change? So you also did talk about your experience. So if you want to share now what your experience was.
Well, and I think in sharing my experience, that's what led me to seeing the utility of this in my practice over time. And so way back when, came from a time, we won't even go to that part of the story, but I had recently, at the time of my experience with these medicines, I had been given a terminal diagnosis. And the years leading up to that terminal diagnosis were less than stellar. I was very good at wearing a mask out in the world. I was very good at being the overachiever. I was very good at hiding the reality of my reality out in the world, because it was too big and overwhelming and dark for me to even contemplate. I didn't think that anybody else could handle it either. And the few people that I tried to let in to see what it was that I was experiencing, they couldn't handle it. Even those people that deeply cared about me, they couldn't handle it. And so it was to a point in my life that on several occasions, I tried to take my own life in my teens, and did not have a belief system that I would ever get out of my circumstances, did not have a belief system that I would break the generational traumas and the sort of lineage of my socioeconomic status and the familial patterns. I did not see any other way out. And even the powers that be around me, the family, the people around me, for lack of a better word, the frequency was so low that there was no expectation for me to do anything within my own circle. Now, out in the outside world, I was a hell of a lot of good at a lot of things, in sports and writing and politics and all the things. Like I out in the outside world, I looked like a very high functioning, person, and was, because it was my escape. And so for me, it was the distraction of life. But inside, there was a lot of other stuff going on, and my family of origin, there was a lot of stuff going on. So I tell you that because at the time of my diagnosis, the initial moment was one of disbelief, like who's 19 years old and gets a terminal diagnosis, right? It was just shy of my 20th birthday. So number one, that's the disbelief piece. Number two, they're like, you're going to die. So that was pretty much right there, because there was no even option for standard of care at that time because it was too far gone. Number three, I was uninsured and I was really out on my own. And they basically said, and because you don't have insurance, you can't really go and see all the people and do all the things. And, so it was just all of these, like, you can't. And somehow inside of me, despite that there was that flash, that moment when I thought, what a great opportunity to leave right now, because I go out as a martyr. I get to go out as, oh, how tragic that she died of cancer. Like I was imagining the celebration of that, and that it would allow me not to ever have to go in and look at and deal with what I had crawled out of. And so it looked like the easy button, but instead it flicked something on inside of me that said, you're going to tell me what to do or not to do. And that pisses me off. And I'm going to find some resources for myself, and not to expect it to live, but I also just wanted to understand the why. So that was a critical piece that was happening. And within a few weeks of that moment, I was supposed to have a big 20th birthday party that I was hosting. All my friends from college, everyone who just knew and loved me, and all the environments that I worked in and all the people, it was like, this is going to be this big bash. And I canceled it, except for my roommate, Chad, who's no longer living. He decided that we'd have our own celebration because he knew what was going on with me. He was also dying of AIDS, so we could talk to each other really easily about these things. But about, 2-3 hours into the night, there's a knock at the door, and this guy and these three guys show up at my front door, the bottle of tequila, and said, what's going on? Where's the party? And I'm like, I canceled it. And I'm like, I'm not drinking, I'm not doing that. And they're like, well, you need to do something else more special. They didn't know what was going on in my life. I didn't tell them. Those people happen to be now, one of those other people is now deceased. He died of stomach cancer. And the other one, he and his wife she's battling stage 4 breast cancer right now. And the other one is now my husband. And so they all showed up and said, well, we're going to go do an adventure. And so I didn't know. I'm a girl from Kansas. Alcohol was the only drug I'd ever tried. I had never smoked pot, nothing. We show up and they pull this big baggie out of somebody's freezer and sit it on the counter, and they're like, these are mushrooms. And I don't know what in my brain is thinking. I don't know why I thought they were going to be in a pill. I don't know what I was thinking, but I was so confused. So they go about their business. They're like, you just eat some of these. So I didn't think, I knew nothing. I have zero information. I'm given this death sentence. I don't want anybody to know about it. I have no filter. I'm like, this is my opportunity to leave this world. I basically ate the whole bag by myself. And when they realized what I had done, they all kind of went into the, oh no mode. And fast forward, what I learned of that accidental sort of self-destructive, self-sabotaging situation is I ended up taking what's considered a very heroic dose. We figured now I probably took somewhere between 9 and 10 grams. At that time, like I said, never done anything, right? That changed my life. Let's just keep that really simple there. And in doing such of that experience of how it changed my life, it changed the way I saw the world. It definitely changed the way I saw myself. It changed the way I saw other people, and it changed the way I saw my condition, and it changed the way I realized how powerful I actually was in changing my condition. And I am pretty convinced this nearly 32 years later that had I not kind of accidentally, probably not an accident, powers that be there, kicked down the wall, I likely would not be having this conversation with you right now.
Wow. So I remember a lot of that story. I didn't now that, and again, but when you don't experience something and you're hearing something new, you can't put yourself in that story because you haven't experienced it. And now that I have experienced not 9 to 10 grams, But but now that I'm on the other side, I'm hearing it differently, and I now understand. So we're in Mexico, we're having this birthday weekend, and they're mentioning it very gently to Doug, and tears are coming out and about his frustrations and his fears and his limitations and the things he's resistance to. And we put it down, and I'm listening, and I'm thinking that's great for cancer patients. And I'm so but it does not resonate with me at all. I am not interested at all. I'm not afraid of it. I just don't think I need it.
I remember. Yeah.
Well, I didn't say that out loud. I said that last year. So then fast forward. So now you guys are here at my house. It's August of 2022, and breakfast. It happens over brunch. Last day, right, we're having breakfast, and then something happens with Doug again with this, because now he's had COVID and he's been on his back, and he's between his throat closing up and his back tightening, and I'm having back pain, and me going, it's emotional, and he's like, ah, and he can't sleep, and he's and he had just gotten over that, and then you guys come. And so, of course, you go out and you get the red light therapy mat for his back, and Steve's talking about him, and it comes up again and again. I don't remember. I think we started talking about patients, patients and clients that we had shared in common, like Tammy, and looking at why people succeed or don't succeed. And not that, and I also believe that some people aren't meant to. So let's take that too, that, we're on a path, and everyone's path is going to be different. But when, and what I've learned and decided, and I also thought before we started working together that cancer is a wake up call, but I get to see it when I meet with people that have cancer, to say, I see, here's the story of where you come from. Oh, of course. But I see it so clearly but you just see it as, this is my life. And you don't see that life is asking you to literally make a 180. And you're not, and you have an opportunity to make that 180. So I was on board, and I'm hearing all about what's happening. And we talked about Tammy, and if Tammy hadn't done it, and how much Tammy might have benefited from doing that, because she was so tight in life and with everything. And she was doing everything right, and doing everything, and overdoing and overcompensating. And she wasn't in a feeling place, and she was in a victim mode, and God bless her, because she tried really hard. And
right.
We trying really hard can get in the way of allowing. And for those of you that have heard my show, and you've heard, I've done 2 conversations on radical remission, and last one with Dr. Kelly Turner. If you read that book, even if you don't have cancer, every single person in that book literally said, see you later, doctors, Western allopathic. I'm out of here. I'm going to go sit on my roof and watch a sunrise and play my banjo. And then I outlive my diagnosis. Why? Because I'm no longer in the stress bubble that creates a situation where I can't heal myself. Like, you cannot heal in that environment. So I'm listening to you talk about this in August of last year. And you said to me, I'm surprised you haven't done it. And I said, well, why would I? and you, do you remember what you said to me?
Well, I think I thought, because you were such a little explorer, I just would have assumed you would have gone on this frontier as well.
No, I said, why would I? And I didn't say that in a defensive way. I just looked at like a serious question, like, well, why would I? And you said validation. And I was like, all right, I can do that. But it wasn't just about living up to, let me go get validated, because I don't need the validation. But it was the understanding that so there's a book that's coming, everybody. It's called The Roadmap to Emotional Healing. And it's been coming for a while. And I have felt sort of not inspired to birth it. It is sitting there. All the parts are there. It just needs to be compiled and given a little bit of love and a little design. And there we go. And it'll be done. It won't take long when I actually am in the right timing for it. But I thought I was being stuck in that moment because, oh, well, you're telling me that this whole area of study, and you weren't the first person to talk about psychedelics on my show, or psilocybin, because Dr. Eben Alexander talked about it. And I thought, okay, well, I don't know anything about this. I'm going to write a book about emotional healing. I should probably learn a little bit about this and explore it so that I understand a point of view on it. It's not about, because of course, any book or any bit of information in science still has a perspective. It still has a point of view. You don't do a scientific test without a point of view. You're looking for something very specific. You're not just doing some random test. You're hoping to find something positive or something negative about a certain situation. There's still a context. So So that was August. So by, I don't know, maybe a week later, 2 weeks later, I had a tincture of ground up mushroom in some other, I don't know, other things that were in it. But it was pretty weak. It wasn't very powerful. It was pretty calm. But because I was all of a sudden like, all right, I'm on this. And I'm like, where do I get it? Right. Okay. And so I remember taking the first dose. It was a microdose of this tincture. And I did feel, I think we went dancing. Was it that day that I did the first tincture? Yeah, it wasn't a big deal. I mean, I might have gotten a little dizzy dancing, because I was spinning. But otherwise, I didn't feel any different, except maybe like a little breath. Like there was this little like airy breath. That's all I can describe it as when I did that. But it wasn't a lot, and it wasn't a big deal. So then, then there were other methods of getting my hands on another form. And what I want to tell people, because, and Nisha's going to talk about this too. This is a serious subject because it's a brain and mind altering. Is it super dangerous? Well, it depends. And I think that's just like with anything, right? That we're looking at that has more your food, like how dangerous is half the food that we eat, right? But when I had some trusted doctor friends who had some connections to get me another cleaner form. Now I had no problem with what I was taking, but it wasn't really powerful and I wanted to have an experience. So then I was looking for it. I'm asking around, okay, where can I go do a heroic dose? Where can I go do an experience, right? Because you're talking about like groups doing it and sitting in ceremony. So I had found somebody locally and she and I met and they did small little groups. And the next time she was going to have one that I could make was November. So, okay, we're in August and October and I got to wait till November. So now I'm like, okay, I don't want to wait till November.
Not known for your patience, JJ.
We can say patience or we can say passion because I am a truth seeker. So what else am I doing? Like you give me a task that I've never thought of before. And now I've tuned into it and now I'm all about it for as much as I need to be. So Doug and I had gone to, after you guys left, we went to Denver. And while we were in Denver, just for a weekend, I was visiting some friends and just went to Denver for no other reason. And we watched at night because we do some Netflix at night or some television. And so I got him to watch the Michael Pollan Netflix series, which is, what's the name of it? How to Change Your Mind. How to Change Your Mind, Michael Pollan, which I've asked him to come on the show and I'm going to keep trying. I don't care if he says no. But Michael Pollan, so for those of you that don't know, there's a book and there's a video series. It's a 4-part video on Netflix. And Doug and I watched it. And he goes over LSD first, and they do a whole show on LSD. They do a show on MDMA, which is ecstasy. They do a show on psilocybin, mushrooms, and they do a show on peyote. And then he mentions tobacco in the beginning of it, but he doesn't do a whole show on tobacco. And so I, with just no judgment, completely open, wanted to watch the show and resonate and see what I wanted to do. Now, you had talked about psilocybin, Dr. Eben Alexander talked about psilocybin. So I knew psilocybin was going to be kind of easier to get and probably something, but I just wanted to learn more about it before diving completely in. So I remember watching it and I went with the LSD. I went, yep, okay, I'd try LSD. And then we went, and then full disclosure, one of the reasons why I have not been at all interested in exploring this is because I have some friends who consider themselves conscious, who they've done ayahuasca and psilocybin and MDMA journeys kind of often.
Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that here in a moment. Yeah.
And I'm not going to say often like abuse of like every weekend or every day. I'm just talking about having big, even like, and he went to Rhythmia down in Costa Rica and did however many days at Rhythmia, which is a place that specializes in doing ayahuasca journeys. And they have doctors there and they have guides there and you go and you're checked out and there's a whole, right. But yet they come and they have experiences, but then they come back and I literally see no fucking change in their life whatsoever. So in my mind, I've got this judgment, which I know a lot of you listening probably also have too, not necessarily of what we're talking about, but of people that I've seen that have done ecstasy or have done mushrooms and have acted stupid and have not changed their lives, or even people who have tried to do it more consciously in ceremony and still haven't necessarily integrated any learnings into clear, obvious behavioral changes.
Right.
So that's why I was like, I don't want to do it. I'm not afraid of it. I just see that person who never changes. So I don't understand, like, okay, you can have this experience, but whether you change or not is a different conversation. And I can change without having the experience. I don't need the experience to change me. I change all the time. Yeah. So that was why I had some resistance. So as I'm watching Michael Pollan's Netflix show and I see MDMA, I thought, which is going to be funny later when I tell you about the ceremony, I thought, yeah, no, I don't need to do that. I don't need to do MDMA. That doesn't call to me. It's like, I'm not afraid of it. I don't have resistance to it. I don't feel called to do it. LSD, yes. Although I haven't done that yet. I will do LSD at some point. Just because I want to try it. After I watched it, I thought I would like to have that experience. Then he went to psilocybin. And of course I was already on board to doing that. And then the peyote, you can speak to. I said I would do it if I was invited, because of course on the show, they're encouraging people to, and I would obviously recommend everybody who's listening to watch this series, How to Change Your Mind. Michael Pollan, you will have a lot of questions answered. They'll go deep into different studies and the trajectory of how these medicines came to be. And we can talk a little bit about that. Nisha has a good experience with all of that and knowledge of that. So this isn't just drugs. These are, if you look at it, plant medicine is a plant that grows outside that you chew on or ingest in some way that has an effect on you. If you take any pharmaceutical drugs, do not be alarmed. This is not something like, oh my God, I'd never do that. Well, do you take a pill from your doctor? Well, they made that in a lab with a lot of things that are not natural and that actually have side effects that will create problems for you. So let's look at this. That is not a natural thing. That is a pure capitalist society,
synthetic version of reality,
version of healing. Okay. These plants existed before you did. So just to put that in perspective. So I watched this with Doug, and this is August, and then I come back and I'm getting ready for my journey here with the group or the people. And I'm like, okay, but I want to do something before that. Like, there's too much time passing. Like, what can I do? So I asked you, what can I do? What do you think a dose would be that would be something I could do on my own? And you said 1 gram. I said, okay.
For you specific, because I know you well enough, because you know your body well enough. I would never make those recommendations to somebody who's green and I don't know them and I don't know theirs. So I want to do my disclaimer right there.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Right. And actually, I was talking to somebody who does some journeys with people. Actually, it's where I get the stuff from. And I asked her what her dosage, and she said between 3 and 10 grams. I went, holy shit, who needs 10 grams? Now, so
I did apparently.
Well, okay, but here's the thing. You had mushrooms in mushroom form. Right. So besides the tincture and then the ceremony I'll talk about in a minute, what I actually ended up getting was concentrated, extracted psilocybin, no mushroom fibers, no meat of the actual plant. So your 10 grams of mushrooms was not 10 grams of psilocybin.
Right.
But my 1 gram, thank God, because my 1 gram of psilocybin was 100% 1 gram of psilocybin, there was no mushroom plant or fiber or anything like that. So I did that, and I'll explain that. I'll tell that story in a second. I kind of want to make sure I equally go back and forth here. And I'll talk about my 1 gram journey. And what we had recommended. And I told you what happened with it. It was very cool. I enjoyed it very much. I learned a lot. I did microdose with that beforehand to just and definitely to see how I'd react and to see what would happen. And it felt fine. It felt clean. It felt good. I got a little bit, the thing about microdosing, although I may change my mind now, is that when I did that very first one, and it was 250 milligrams, which actually is not a true microdose. A true microdose is 150 milligrams. So 250 milligrams opened up the portal. So I was with a client, and downloads are coming, but downloads come anyway. Like, I'm like, the biggest lessons of the 1 gram for me was slowing down. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't need to speed up. I have so much fire in my chart. I need to be more grounded, not speed up. Even if it's grounded speed, I still don't want to be more speedy. I want to be more grounded. So I thought, microdosing may not be for me. Well, okay. I may have changed my mind on that, but because that was 250. So then I did my 1 gram, had a great experience, and then thought, okay, well, I still had a lot of time. I had a lot of time between that and then the ceremony that I was thinking a heroic dose. And I was like, okay, I don't know what that's going to be. I think they told me it was going to be 5 grams, with a little bit of MDMA to start. I was like, okay, cool. But I was like, okay, that's 5. I've done 1. Let me go do 2 now. So the 2, well, I'll talk about that journey in a second. So I'll tell those, I want you to talk. Why don't we start to explain some of the reasons why we're even having this conversation about what psilocybin does and the history and all that.
So even back at that time, when I had that accidental experience that completely, fully changed my life and put me on a very different path, a very different trajectory, and a very different understanding and being in this world, I had to keep that secret. It was not the time or the place. And I had a very, just from where I was brought up in a very conservative environment. I was very private because there was a lot of addictions in my family. And I was very afraid that, like, I didn't understand what I do now, like, they actually use these types of medicines to treat addictions, but I didn't know this back in 1991. There was no Dr. Google. There was no talking about this. The only people I knew who did these drugs were druggies. And I had a lot of judgments around that, and a lot of judgments around addictions. And I had no idea what I was stepping into when I had that experience. And so I also felt very protective of it, if that makes sense, that it was so incredibly sacred. I had actually been very far away from God for a period of time in my life because of some experiences that I had that left me pretty jaded in that world. And as weird as that sounds, it really reintroduced me back to God in a very different way for myself, and really honed and cultivated my spiritual practice that has just also been a pillar of my own health and journey and way of being in the world and my own value systems, et cetera. But fast forward, when I was even very quiet, even with close friends, to tell them that I did this, right? Like it was like a little bit of shame or a little embarrassment, or kind of hide it, or they kind of knew, or they were watching and kind of like, is she going to turn into a druggie? And, so it was just this weird place. And then by the time I got into medical practice, it was definitely not appropriate to talk about these things in a medical practice environment. That was just absolutely never going to happen, until I started getting lots and lots of patients dealing with cancer who were so afraid of dying that they were no longer living. And their prognosis and their diagnosis was such that they could have had decades on the time clock, but they were so petrified, they stopped living in order to focus on how absolutely not to die. And that was far more painful for me to watch them going through that and churning in that, and being in the place where they couldn't receive anything. They couldn't receive standard of care medicines. They couldn't receive alternative care medicines. They couldn't receive nourishment. They couldn't receive love. They were so stuck. And I knew I could not have the conversations. I mean, this is at a time, mind you, that we couldn't even talk about. Just think about how quickly time has changed. I couldn't even talk about cannabis back at the time. Right. We like underground railroad cannabis medicines for patients to help them deal with the nausea and the pain and the anxiety and the poor appetite. We were like sneaking that in long before, because instead of having a patient on 6 or 7 drugs they couldn't tolerate that weren't working, I knew that there was one medicine that might be able to help, but it was illegal. And this is coming from a person who doesn't even use those medicines, because I have SNPs that make me psychotic on cannabis, on THC. And so I'm not into it. It's not a medicine for me, but I saw the utility of it in my patients with cancer. So the same thing started happening when I saw these patients that were facing their mortality and stuck. And one particular patient that changed my life in this was a woman with ovarian cancer. That her ovarian cancer came from actually a lot of energies around not being able to conceive. But part of that was because she wasn't in a partnership that was worth anything for her. She was also then single for many years. She went to great lengths, including tons and tons of IVF, which then ended up, unfortunately, I believe from her labs and her epigenetics, we learned later, contributed very much to why she ended up with stage 4 ovarian cancer, as well as the grief and the loss of this piece. But once she finally realized she couldn't have kids, she adopted her daughter, and went into the darkest spiral ever, to the point where she became suicidal. And the only thing keeping her alive was this little girl that she now had at home. The thing that she wanted her entire life that she had, she couldn't see it. And so it was this place where it was devastating. She was ready to go and have shock treatments, because every pharmaceutical failed her. every single one of them failed her. Every therapy, every experience she had, she was so ready to give up. And I just knew, I could just see, because that's the other gift of these medicines, is it helps me really see people very, very differently. I think that's just my theory, but my experience. But I knew about this study that was happening at Harvard. This is back in 2011. Maybe 2012, somewhere in that zone. And it was a study for psilocybin used in end of life to help people basically face their mortality to prepare them for death. And it was to help them remove the anxiety of them facing their death. And even though it wasn't exactly the flavor she had, she lived really close to the area. She was desperate for anything. She's like, I'll do anything. And this is back in a time when we couldn't like fly them down to Rhythmia in Costa Rica or whatnot. So she agreed to enroll in that trial. She had 2 journeys, facilitated, very medical environments. This woman, not only does she no longer have stage 4 ovarian cancer and she's thriving, her daughter graduated from high school 2 years ago. She is happier than she's ever been in her entire life. And she's never needed anything else outside of those 2 journeys, ever. It changed everything for her. And it was that moment in this, because she was a scientist as well. That's a very important part of this. And so for me to watch what that did, suddenly it validated my experience, all of those, at that point, decades before, to think, maybe there's something to this. And to start to realize, I sent more patients into this clinical trial. I think I had a total of 11 who went through that clinical trial and all had very, very interesting experiences. Someday I hopefully will write about that as well, or they will write about that as well. And it's still, though, even though they were in clinical studies and very high academic institutions, you still didn't talk about it. And it was honestly not until, even though you started hearing murmurings of it, and in the biohacker community, you started hearing murmurings of it, but it honestly wasn't until Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, came out, that people started coming out of the woodwork saying, I had an experience with this, or, so-and-so had an experience with this. And then the documentary series. And then now everyone and their dog is literally talking to me about it, telling me their stories, telling me their experiences, asking how they can have this experience. And the caveat before I hand the volley back over the net to you is that one thing you said earlier is absolutely true, which is we all have access to this wisdom and this knowledge within ourselves without psychedelics. I just want people to know that it is absolutely at our fingertips. It is absolutely who we are. So that's really important to know. And I know you speak to that. Some people, though, it's so out of their sphere of reality that they need that little lock and key to allow them to see themselves maybe for the very first time.
Yeah, I just started to tear up when you talked about that we all have access to this. And this is where my quantum physics, law of attraction, validation piece came in of like, no, I live this, I understand this, I see this, and I understand that not everybody sees it. And there's a certain, our brains can, based on, again, whole brain living and Joe Bolte-Taylor's work, our left brain can synthesize this data, but it doesn't have the capacity to experience it like the right brain does. So she has her character 1, her character 2 are both parts of the left brain, the thinking and the feeling brain, and the opposite side, the thinking and feeling brain of the right side. And so, the separatism of the left brain and we are all connected of the right brain. These concepts are, depending on, let me bring in some astrology, depending on your moon sign and how you process emotion, but literally how you also interpret information and the level of consciousness and readiness and expansion and the frequency that you live at and what you're ready for and what you can handle and how it, like, becoming real is really what people need to do. And mine happened. I mean, I could talk for days. You give me an Abraham question, law of attraction question, I had the answer. But I had to look myself in the mirror in 2009 and say, you're full of shit. Because you know it, but you're not living it. Look at you. You're totally doing this. My Fit to Love book. You're doing this book. You have this anxiety that's driving everything. This isn't trust. And I was like, holy shit. Once I had that recognition, I changed all my behaviors because I was like, no, that's not how I want to live. I I know how I want to live. I'm just not doing it because it means there's consequences. It means I have to take action. It means I have to stop doing a lot of things. It means that there are going to be ripples and waves in my life that I'm ready for because I'm committed to this. But most people aren't, because most people want to stay comfortable, even if they're miserable. The comfort of their misery is known versus the fear of the unknown. They won't do it. So on that faithful Sunday in August, when you were here and tasked me with, you didn't task me, I tasked me, but you said, in all honesty, why would I do it? Validation. I was like, all right. Because again, I have no fear of it. I never have had a fear of any of these things. I don't have a fear of losing control. I don't have a fear of, so going back to my 1 gram journey. So the 1 gram journey the most I've been able to do is talk Doug into one 250 milligram at the time, which I thought was a microdose. So that day I did the 1, he did 250. So I didn't know I was supposed to take it on an empty stomach. So I had just had a very large breakfast and we were sitting sort of watching television. It was a Sunday on the couch. And I remember when it hit me, I started to feel my digestion. Like I became super tuned into my digestion. I was like, oh, I don't know that I feel good. And I knew it wasn't that the drug made me feel bad. It was that I was feeling my digestion. And then my body got really heavy on the couch. I was like, oh my God, I feel, and I'm talking this out loud the whole time. And I said, oh my God, my body feels so heavy. Why is it so heavy? Is it because I carry a lot of tension? That's really sad. And I start to cry. Because now I'm sad because I walk around with more tension than I would like. Now, as I'm crying, Doug looks out the window and he goes, oh my God, look at that grasshopper. It has huge knees. And I just busted out laughing. I started laughing and I was like, oh my God. And there it is. So it just pivoted me now to like being funny. So I'm laughing because he's now super focused, right? Because what happens on psilocybin, yes, the visuals are like you're in triple HD, like things become so clear and crisp in the way that you see things. Well, depending on the dose, depending on what stage of the dose. So, for me, that's what this did. And it did for him at that level. And then I think that heaviness, I kind of got up and I walked outside and I remember I was doing Marco Polos to my mastermind at the same time because I wanted them to see and I wanted to like record what was happening. And I went outside at the time. And the wind was probably not blowing any more than it is right now, but there was a little bit of sun and I was mesmerized by my trees and my pool and the yard. I was like, oh my God, there's so much going on in my backyard. I was so tuned in and grounded and in awe of life.
Oh, beautiful.
And I just sat there on the couch. I laid down for a little bit and I just watched. It's like, and I'm watching it right now. Like I'm looking at my backyard right now. And the difference is I have to force myself to stay focused if I'm looking right now. Then I was so connected to it all that there was no effort. It was entertaining. It was mesmerizing. It was emotional. It was fluid. It was energy. And I was just tuned into it. And so then it started to dissipate. And that's when I started to use that tincture. Cause I remember you had talked about someone starting at a level, then like after a while, like going up a little bit more, going up a little bit more. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. So I took that tincture and I kept doing like a gram of the tincture every couple hours and it did nothing. That's when I'm like, okay, this is worthless. So I actually don't think I did anything more than a gram that day. So, okay. So I was totally awake and aware and not sleepy or anything. And the heaviness kind of went away. That was my 1 gram journey. So I had it amazing. It felt really good. It felt really, really good. And it taught me. And here's what, like I had my ex-husband's friend once. I remember he was a lawyer or he is a lawyer and he's a Gemini, super anxious, did no drugs or alcohol at the time. And that's not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. But at one point, and don't smoke pot, I said to him, dude, do you need to like smoke some pot? Just one time. And the only reason why I want you to smoke it one time is to understand the level that you will then work to get to on your own without it.
Right.
So I had that years ago and I'd said that to more than one person. I'm like, you have to calm down. And I know you don't know what that means. So maybe do something to get you there, like chemically, and then work at whatever, meditating,
to get a
slowing down
of it. So you know what you can obtain.
Right. So you know what that feels like because you have no clue.
Right.
So that was my 1 gram. And that reminded me. So from that, I was very focused on grounding, more grounding, not in a grounding, go stand outside kind of way. Yes. And energy grounding, simplifying, focusing, acknowledging my breathing, my presence. So all of it. So that was a really great first experience on, that wasn't a microdose. And then fast forward, now we go to my 2 gram. Right. So I'm thinking the 2 grams is going to be like, I don't know what to expect on my 2 gram, but now I know, don't eat before you do it. So I take the 2 and I'm watching the time, and I didn't eat, but man, was I getting hungry. So it took about an hour to kick in. And around 45 minutes, I was like, shit, I got to eat. Cause if I don't eat now, it's going to be hours until I eat. So I'm going to eat now. So I went and I ate, and I came to this office, which looked different at the time. And I sat down. Last time I did it kind of was outside. This time I sat down in my office, and I have a picture of New York City back in 2000, because that's when I moved, because the Twin Towers are still on this picture. And the picture was up on the wall. And I just sort of sat on the floor. It was sunny. Sun was coming in again. It was a Sunday. I had the whole day set, and I had Doug at like ready and willing at any time to be there for me. Okay. He wasn't doing anything that day. He wasn't joining me. He was just babysitting me. Because I have the tools and stuff. So I didn't feel like I needed somebody else at that time. And I didn't know what 2 was going to do for me. So anyway, what happened in my brain is that I started to see things on the picture move. I was like, and he heard me scream. I'm like, and I was like, I know you can't see this, but, and I'm like, the water's moving and the train's moving, but it's not really anyway. And so I got really excited about what I was seeing, because now my eyes and my brain are starting to change what I'm seeing. And I think that 2 gram journey had levels. I could even, and I won't describe them all here, but they were levels. The first level was this sort of conscious state where my eyes started to see things differently. I even saw the striations of the air. When the sun would come through, I would see the frequencies of the air, like of oxygen. And I went from sitting up to eventually sort of lying down on my side, and my eyes were open. My eyes were open for a good part of it. But then my eyes got heavy. And as I started to close my eyes, because when you watch, if you haven't, How to Change Your Mind, the one thing I didn't like about that documentary and the clinical trials was how clinical it felt. Yeah. I didn't like how everybody was in a room that had no windows. They were lying on a bed with a mask on their eyes, and 2 people there with notepads and sitting in chairs. I'm like, ooh, ick. No, I don't want that. That feels like I'm trapped. I don't want to feel trapped. I want to feel free. And I remember you telling me stories of people and doing it outside. I'm like, yes, I want to feel free. I want to feel connected. I don't want to feel trapped. So I didn't have anything covering my eyes. But at some point it got heavy enough that my eyelids closed. And eventually every once in a while I kind of like pry them open to see. And again, now we've gone to it's not fuzzy. It's just, you see many different layers of existence. So, and when I close my eyes now, and I had this music, I was working with someone on some, let's say, lower chakra stuff. Okay. Like some vagina steaming, some like hormonal balancing stuff. And she had recommended this one song, this one artist. And so she gave it to me, and I'd listened to it one time, but really didn't do anything with it. So I thought, I'll put that on. So I put this song on. And then I don't even know what happened after that, because there's only like 4 tracks, and it went on for 5 hours, and it perfectly guided my journey with the music. So that way, when I closed my eyes, it's called soul merge. Mm-hmm. So when I closed my eyes, I mean, there was so much going on. I now got the whole like eye mask thing. I'm like, oh my, not that I wanted eye mask, but there was just so much going on. It was so colorful, and it was so movement. And anyway, and again, that was probably like level 2. And then at some point I got really cold, and I asked for a blanket, and then I got really cold. I moved to the bed. Doug moved to the bed. And again, anyone that's interested in hearing more about each part of my journey, and everyone's journey is different, but I will say, here are the highlights besides what I just said. So when I was really, really cold, when I got to the bed, I did feel things in my body, and I was waiting for, when you said validation, I thought, okay, there are some things I'm concerned about, or things that I doubt, or things that I want that I don't have. And I guess I'm going to know now if I'm going to get them or not. And in my journey, I physically felt them as reality. And I was like, okay. And even though I didn't have a breakout of crying, I was at times laughing really hard because my chest hurt the next day. But tears were coming out, but not in a hysterical, I wasn't there. In fact, it was very happy. It was really, really rich of what Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor calls her character 3. It's the right feeling brain. It was like all colors, all emotions, all joy, all things, but it was beautiful. None of it was scary or bad or felt wrong. And so when I was on the bed and I was super cold and like I have a heating pad and like 3 blankets on me, and then Doug was laying next to me at some point, and I could feel him there, and he told me he was there, and I was saying things, and I said, and this is the one thing I wish I would have known ahead of time to say, can you please, I did ask him, will you please write down everything you hear me say? Because I was saying some good shit. And I was like, I want to remember what I'm saying. And I do. And he did, but I didn't ask him soon enough because stuff was coming up. And I was like, well, okay. And because you don't lose consciousness. Like you don't lose, you're not so, like I remember everything that happened to as much as I can remember everything that happened in a 4 to 5 hour period. But and so the one other thing that's so cool, oh, it was so cool, was that so I'm laying on the bed, and again, eventually I'd always open my eyes every so often just to sort of check in, not because I was nervous, because I just, was Doug there? I'd look, okay, Doug is there. He went to kiss me because he was going to leave the bedroom, and as he leaned over, my eyes were closed. As he leaned over, before I opened my eyes and knew he was there, because he kissed me first, and I felt his love. Like if you could imagine being shot from a dolphin's sonar into your heart and having the vibration or reverberation, I felt that reverberation from him of his love for me. And I was like, like, I mean, not orgasmically, like, oh my God, it's so much. I feel your love. And he kissed me on the cheek and said, I love you. And I was like, oh my God, I really feel that, like in a physical, in my body, every cell vibrating kind of way, not in a, oh, that's nice, or it feels warm and fuzzy. Like it moved me.
Beautiful. I love it. It cellularly changed you.
It cellularly changed me. And I'm like, that is the coolest. Now I understand how animals know me. Like and children. Well, because when you feel this intense love for somebody, whether we're able to, there's nothing different that he did. I was in a place to receive it differently.
Exactly. I think you just nailed it. You were able to receive. You were able to receive all of the gifts of who you are and the world around you. And even though you had a million tools and had been on this path for some time in the healing arts, it took it to another level for you. It just helped you even realize, literally, like you talk about it, like it's one thing to be intellectual and tangible about it, but to integrate it and feel it and to just have the knowing of it. What a powerful experience. And I think there's a lot of people who you can't, like even people listening right now would probably be like, I don't even, what are they on it right now? What's going on here?
No, we're not on it. No, we're not on it.
No, but I think that that's the piece here, is that the way I've understood it for myself and have had other people share it with me. And I feel like we haven't had this conversation specifically, but I feel like it would resonate with you, is that it helps us remember where we came from and who we really are. And that's pretty powerful, and that it really dissolves the polarities of the world around us. It really dissolves a lot of the self-inflicted conflict that we impose on ourselves and those around us. It changes things so that you can be receptive for whatever reality you choose and for whatever healing you choose. And that's really beautiful to me. And one of my favorite stories, which I think ties up around this, is there was a study, and I can't remember the details. I'll try and find it so you can post it to this, but they brought together a rabbi. It sounds like a joke, right? They brought a rabbi and a priest and a Buddhist monk, and I'm terrible. I've forgotten the name for the Muslim spiritual leader, but they brought all of them into this study, and they had them all take psilocybin, and they recorded their experiences and all came back together. And it's like, it just makes me emotional just thinking about, like, they all had the same experience. They all recognized God at its absolute essence. It was mind-boggling for each of them to even be able to connect with and see something. And I just thought it was such a profound, I'm sure if we Google it, we can probably find it right off the bat here, but that really left a resonance with me, and hearing that, and then hearing from now that patients are talking about these experiences. And I've had the ability to be with colleagues of mine and patients who have embarked on this journey in containers, where I've also seen where when people say, well, it can't cause harm, I have seen where it can cause harm. You have to be as ready as you can be. You need to be guided. You need to be facilitated. You need to have your own wherewithal to know if you're a candidate for it or not. We do need more screenings for people because there are certain psychiatric disorders that are not appropriate for these types of medicines. There are certain levels of trauma that unless you have someone who can really guide you through this, you really need someone who's skilled and trained in this. You need to maybe focus in one medicine or a layering effect of medicines and a much more not a bunch at times. So we just had an experience with a bunch of doctors actually, where it was a pretty intensive 3-day journey of a variety of these medicines. And I think any one of the people in the group would have said that one day and that one medicine would have been plenty. And some loved the entire experience of taking it all in, just showing the difference of our constitutions. And some were traumatized by it. All of us have worked very hard on integrating that information, and all of us have gleaned the messages we needed to get from that experience, even those who had what would be considered intense journeys or experiences. But I want people to know that this is not to be taken lightly, that it should be handled in a very reverent and sacred manner with people who are called to be stewards of these medicines. It's like when the guys stumbled upon Maria Sabine in Mexico back in the 1950s, 1960s, and had their experience. They well intended to bring it here to bring us deep healing, but it ended up getting kind of tweaked and twisted that people, because you mentioned this earlier, people started to use it as an escape rather than a running to. So people started to use it as a running away from versus a running to or through process. And I think that that's what's kind of happening right now in the world around us. Is you do have like a shaman on every corner or a center popping up in every jungle across the country, across the world, or little places popping up in, LA and all over the map, that suddenly it's losing the intention that was behind it. And so I appreciate that people are experimenting with it and trying it on for size, but it's taking us further away from her messages, from the wisdom and from the reason it co-evolved on this planet with us. So I just caution people to not become kind of the weekender or the, like you said, like maybe a couple times you're like, it's such, if you go and have these experiences, if you don't prepare the field to go into the experience and you don't work in a way to integrate the experience, it's just like bumping the dopamine and getting nowhere. And so you spoke to that so beautifully earlier. And so I do want to caution people that for me, my husband calls it my emotional enema. When I know when I reach a point where I'm like, I could probably use some help to move through. I am incredibly empathic. I take on a lot. I do my work and I think I clear it out until I don't, like you're like, I'm doing good, I'm doing it until I crash. And so it's a medicine that still comes into my life in a different form and fashion over decades, over 3 decades now. And it's become a very powerful tool for me, but I don't take it lightly. I'm very, very respectful of it. And I'm very, very conscientious and cautious of who and where I utilize this medicine. I don't use it recreationally. It's not meant to be that way. And it's not to say that if people have used it that way and liked it and got good experiences, great, so be it. But in the realm that I use it in, it's in a realm of truly a medicinal approach and helping when I can't break through on my own, when I've tried all my tricks and all the things I know to do and all the different things. I don't push away from it. People who know me knows that I don't run from anything. I run towards everything. And so if I'm still like running towards something and I'm up against a wall of myself, that has been a tool that has been very effective for me. And even this, like when you talked about 150 milligrams, 25 milligrams will do that for me. My body resonates with it so well. It's like it remembers. Even if I look at it, hold it, my body is already back into the rhythm of it. It's like, we got this, we remember this, those pathways are now lit up again, you're back on track. And so I want people to like have an understanding, do some reading, explore this for themselves, as well as, their loved ones. If you are in this place where you've tried the things and you need a little deepening of your experience, don't be afraid of it, but also don't just run into it willy-nilly. I mean, JJ is the person, like her story is unique in that that's just her personality too, to run towards things. And so, her experience might be different than yours, but I'm really glad that you shared that of that piece and how it evolved for you over the time. Like, I don't need this, but no, I'm kind of curious, like, will it validate all the things I already know to be true? And then it sounds to me like that is for sure the experience you had. And for me, it validated for me all those years ago that I did matter, that I belonged on this planet, that I was deeply loved and cared for and safe. That message had never come to me before that moment. And I think it has informed and instructed and guided me ever since.
And that's why I felt called to be responsible about the work I'm doing. So since we've last spoke, because, I keep fine tuning, and I'm becoming a specialist around these core wounds. So much so that I thought I'd never do another 3-month program again. And when I was in the 6-month this time, I went to a new level with it. I was like, I just keep excavating like what to do with it, to streamline it, to create neuroplasticity. How do we create neuroplasticity? Here's the information. Here's the data. How do we make changes? How do we in conscious form make changes? And some people, based on many factors, will make changes faster than others. And they're the people that may not be able to. I mean, again, they can, but whatever emotional, psycho, traumatic issues they may have, then what? Somebody desperately wants change, and they're not like us, and they don't run towards things, and they aren't willing to be uncomfortable, and they shit their pants when they think they're going to do something that's like a little bit, right? Like they think they're going to die because they have to cry, and they don't, right? So they're so afraid of their emotions or feeling out of control with their emotions. And so that was where I'm like, all right, hold on. This is going to play a role. And me experiencing it, because I can't write about something I don't have an experience with or know or understand. And that was part of the journey. So to finish out my story, and I won't go through the whole thing, although it's hilarious, because it wasn't my journey. I was on somebody else's journey. I was there to witness her journey. It was awesome. But what I learned by doing this whole ceremony night and whatever with these people and doing the mushrooms. So when I took the MDMA, it was probably half of whatever regular, if you were just to do MDMA by itself, the dosages, felt nothing. Then I did 2.5 grams of crushed mushroom in some pineapple juice. And an hour went by or so. I wasn't timing us, but, and I wasn't really feeling like a lot. Like I was feeling it, but nowhere compared to what I had done with the 2. And I was because now I'm at 2. So I'm just doing the math. I'm like, I did 2 on my own. This is 2.5. What's going on? Why am I not? What's happening here? And I kept asking. And so that led me down the path of saying, well, what's this strand? Or what's the strand that I have? And like, what's the difference? And really the bottom line was what I have is extracted psilocybin. And this is plants. So this 2.5 is not 2.5 grams of psilocybin. So I ended up going up to 5, but it never matched what I did here with the 2. And anyway, and it was just interesting to watch myself in that environment. And they're all about, they study and they travel the world and go to the different countries and have their shamans, and they have all these different toolbox of medicines and things. And I'm not really interested in trying all of them. That's not what I was about. But what this has led me to is having a tool that I feel really confident about, the cleanliness of the product, and having, also the integration. You talk about the integration piece and how your friend, the woman with the child who did 2 heroic doses and then sort of hasn't done anything since. When I look at integration, because again, looking at my friends who do some MDMA all the time or do ayahuasca, and then I look at, have you integrated that into your life? Nope, you don't do anything differently. That has become, for me, looking at our patterns and our habits in our life, and then how, with or without a drug, a psilocybin or a plant medicine, how do I consciously choose a different pattern that goes against that belief system to create neuroplasticity and to create neural pathways in my right brain, most likely? How do I decrease sort of that left brain a little bit, turn the right brain on? When I came out of my 2 in my bed, I said, holy crap, Jill Bolte-Taylor didn't need to have a stroke. All she needed to do is take 2 grams of psilocybin. because it's almost like I felt my left brain go, goodbye, I'm taking a nap. And my right brain went, hello, I'm here. It was that night and day. It was that obvious of like the linear thinker, get stuff done, blah, blah, blah person went like, bye-bye, taking a nap. And it wasn't that I was offline. it got quiet.
Regulated that one.
And then the whole right brain was like, "Ooh, I get to play now." And, so it was a very cool experience that I hope to inspire others to consider when they try without it to change patterns and are not finding themselves. And even if you are still changing patterns, because you can get to, like, one of the clients I'm working with now once is going to come because she said, because she's got a lot of stored grief in her lungs, right? And I was like, okay, let's just, this would be a good thing to sort of get you there quickly, because your brain is so fast. She's an Aquarius. It's so fast that you're always thinking, and it disconnects you from your heart. It disconnects you from your body. Let's get you in your body. Let's get you grounded. And then like, let's let some stuff out. And then you can still keep integrating with all the tools that we have. My issue with this conversation, not our conversation, but with the conversation in general, is that people think it's a one and done. And sometimes it may be. Sometimes it may be, but for a lot of people, it's not going to be. They're going to have an experience, and they're going to remember, and then they're going to go back into their life and forget because they don't change anything in their lives. And I think I'm not like that, that, and everyone knows that. If I have an idea, if I see an awareness, I will change it right now. But the majority of people don't do that. And so I also just wanted to share my experiences and have Nisha kind of talk about this, because I just want you to recognize that while we're in favor of and think there's a lot of benefit for a lot of people and some transformation and just really fast neuroplasticity that can happen, be mindful of that. You still have a responsibility to yourself to keep those lessons alive and to finish out that reintegration in your brain by changing your patterns and behaviors on the back end from what you learned. So I have my list of things that I said, but I know I've heard from other people that said, God, I wish I would have done it with someone who would have been able to help take me deeper, or to uncover or to unlock things that I didn't feel comfortable saying in front of other people or whatever. So just make sure that you do your homework, you do your research, you really thoroughly plan out and know what your goals are and what you're up against, and that you have a plan on the back end, that this integration piece is not an option. It's to honor the everything that you're doing, and to make sure that it isn't in vain that you had this one experience that may, without anything else, change you a little bit, but take it, respect the whole process enough to allow it to continue and get what you learned and do it. So what else to finish out this conversation do you want to tell people?
I think you covered it. It's like, you took them through a journey of if you want to, like you talked about, like an excavation, it's like you took the excavation, now you're building a new foundation, a new structure, and the opportunity is there. And I think I even had that one experience back when I was on my 20th birthday. That would have been a one and done and would have taken me very far in life. And these moments when I've tapped back into it have been when I have been in a different place in my mind, my body, and my spirit, and even my physical location and other things. So it was at a place where I met myself in a new place. I wasn't going back to the old place ever again. Like, I am not the person I was before that moment when I was 20 years old. I will never be that person again. And so each of these times I've incorporated this at different times in my life ever since then. It's transformed me to not go back. And I use this term a lot with my patients. You do not want to return to the soil in which you got sick. And so in those moments that it's time to pluck a few weeds, get in there and dig around the soil a little bit, amend it, and move forward to plant something new, these are opportunities. And there's many tools in which you can do that. And one of them can be the application of well thought out, well supported psychedelic medicine. So I think on that's all I have to say. And may you have a beautiful experience if you are new to this, if you are seasoned with this, maybe having a different awareness of how you can go in and meet this medicine and how this medicine can meet you.
Thank you so much for being willing to have this conversation with me. I guess maybe one thing we do need to mention is that it isn't illegal everywhere, and there's been an active decriminalization. So there are states that it is legal. And people are working tirelessly, if you watch How to Change Your Mind, of changing the legality around it. Even if it's not going to become legal, it's decriminalized. So it's not, it's not going to be
Yeah. And they're even getting trained, they're even training physicians on how to facilitate these medicines. I've got some colleagues that are in a training program this week and a whole group going to another training program in Denver next week. And this is happening. This is becoming part of standard of care medicine, folks. So it's not going to go away. But I think that we want to be mindful not to turn it into like, here, take this pill and not do anything, not take a proactive, personal approach to it. So with that being said, don't let the spirit of it be lost in the midst of it becoming more accepted and normalized in our culture today. So,
yep. And then just one more thing, because I don't want to put this on another show, microdosing. Microdosing has an ability to create new neural pathways also without sort of that high experiential need to, right, like put you in a different state. And that again, so there are different ways to do this. The microdosing is one, and then heroic doses. And so obviously you want to do your homework, do your research, figure out what you need, work with somebody. And I just want, for those that don't want to do some big like crash into or expansion, but they want to sort of work their way in. That is because I've talked with many people and even other doctors that don't do any of this on my show. And I said, look, if I have the choice between if someone's being prescribed antidepressants, I mean, that's going to wreck your gut. I'd rather somebody, and it's not going to create new neural pathways, it's just going to block ones. So I'd rather you be taking some plant medicine and creating new neural pathways that over time will eventually change the whole thing, and it won't wreck your gut in the process. And it's a natural plant medicine. So, but I would love to see that become standard of medicine instead of antidepressants, that they would recommend microdosing.
let's hope.
I know. Let's hope.
So.
Okay. Dr. Nisha, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, JJ. You rock. Thanks, everybody. Thanks.